Hello everyone, and once again a very warm welcome to this videocast Beyond Books and Blogs, inspiring CX stories brought to you by Epic Consulting. I'm Ghulam Hasnan Ali, your host and founder at Epic Consulting, and as a lot of you are already aware, this series is all about bringing you stories and experiences of customer centricity passionados who've really kind of used journey maps and service blueprints and perhaps other alignment diagrams to help their organizations and the clients they work with build customer centric cultures and practices. So these heroes and champions of the customer's cause, what we'll call them, are going to share with us firsthand their stories and experiences of why they started mapping customers' journeys in the first place. What are the kind of challenges they faced along the way, what their typical projects look like, what kind of benefits they've seen their customers on and their organizations benefit or get from journey mapping, and most important, tips for newcomers who want to get going and adopt this practice. So once again, warm welcome. Thank you for joining us. And let me turn to our guest today, who is Annette Franz. Annette Franz is founder and CEO, Chief Experience Officer, of course, of CX Journey Incorporated. She's got 25 years of experience in both helping companies understand their employees and customers and identifying what drives retention, satisfaction, engagement, and the overall experience. So that together you can design a better experience for all constituents and stakeholders. Annette is also co-founder of Insight Wave, a customer experience accelerator that helps customer experience professionals operationalize the customer experience strategy across their organizations. And Annette was named one of the 100 most influential tech women on Twitter by Business Insider and is regularly recognized by companies around the world as a top influencer in customer experience. So I think, Annette, with that introduction, we could well end the session right now. but I think that's a great start. And Annette, what I'd like to ask you first, though, is what got you into journey mapping? Why did you start journey mapping? I've heard all kinds of stories from different people. Some people actually said that they hated it initially, or they thought it was too soft and fuzzy. So what's your story on that?
So, like you said, my career goes back in this customer experience space, goes back about 25 years. And I wasn't doing any journey mapping back then, but as my career evolved and I was working at some of the VOC vendors, it was different at that point. We were looking at the customer journey to really identify where we should be getting feedback from customers, where we should be listening to customers, where we had already listened, and what the experience looked like along that journey. And it was a lot more high level at that point. It's certainly evolved since then, and that's probably been 10 or 15 years ago when I started doing that. So, but yeah, it's definitely evolved into a bigger process that's really all about, culture change and CX transformation and all of that, and bringing the customer into the center of the business. So yeah, that was probably right about when I started journey mapping, was 10 or 15 years ago, but it was a different way of mapping then and a different purpose than it is today. So.
Okay. Was there at any point, can you kind of recall and say, okay, there was a eureka moment when you said, okay, we really do have to continue. I mean, journey mapping is really the heart of trying to make CX transformations. Was there any kind of maybe an engagement or a moment, or?
That's a really good question. It was probably about 8 or 9 years ago. I don't remember this specific moment or this specific engagement, but it was sort of that. There was that aha moment that we need to now take this and look at things at a deeper level and not just, look for places to listen to our customers. We need to really think about what are all those steps in between and actually take what we heard from the customer in the surveys and different ways that we were listening and plot the steps that they were taking and where things were breaking down and where they were going well. So yeah, I don't remember the specific moment, but it was, I would say it was probably around 2011 when that happened.
Okay. Okay. And since then, though, Annette, you've probably, in your practice as a consultant, you probably refine the process that you use to make sure that journey mapping projects are successful. So I'd like it'll be neat for our audience to hear kind of a typical project process, and if you want to
Okay.
anchor that around perhaps you know there's generally B2B and B2C, and it's typically a little more challenging in B2B environments. And then there is also a hot topic of purpose, especially with millennials who want to work in organizations that have purpose. So
Yes.
trying to get the organization culture around that purpose. How does that interplay with a typical project of yours where you've seen that kind of benefit?
Yeah. So let's start with, that was a lot. So let's start with the typical process. I do have a 6-step process that I go through with my clients, and even though I have this process nailed down, it definitely does evolve over time. It's been fine-tuned, and I customize it for everybody that I work with, right? So, even though there's 6 like big steps, like the micro steps within each of those phases will get tweaked just because of who the client is or what their situation is, right? So the 6-step process is really around, first is planning, like making sure we have the right people and the personas, and understanding which journey we're going to map and why we're going to map with the objectives, and what they plan on doing with what they learned, right? And I think that's a key point, right? Because if we don't know why we're mapping, and we don't have the budget and the resources to do something with what we learned after we're done, then it's pointless. I mean, don't even map. It's just a waste of everybody's time. So we start with that piece, right? Making sure we've got all our ducks in a row. And then from there, we go into the workshop and we map. And I'm trying to go real high level here because I know we have a lot of other things we want to talk about. So I'm trying to stay really high level because I could really go into detail on these things. But the next thing, we go into the workshop and we map. And I'll just say a couple of things here about the actual mapping workshop, right? First of all, the best thing to do is have customers in the room. Map with your customers. I see so many times when people don't do that. They do assumptive maps sometimes, or they just map based on what they think the journey is and then leave it at that and never validate it with customers, or haven't really 100% given the customer perspective to what they're doing. The other thing is that I've seen people during their workshops actually map touch points and map life cycles. And that's not what we're doing. We can't design anything if we've just got a bunch of touch points on the map in the different life cycle stages. We've actually got to pick a journey, a call to customer service, making a purchase, going to pick up some coffee, whatever it is, and then map in detail, step by step, what the customer is doing, thinking, and feeling. There's a lot of different frameworks, as you know, for mapping, but we want to at least capture what the customer is doing, thinking, and feeling. After we're done mapping, and I love to do butcher paper and Post-it notes. I love to get people out of their chairs, thinking, creative, asking questions, just interacting and talking to each other. And so afterwards, we want to digitize the maps, because when we digitize the maps, we can do a lot of the things and adhere to a lot of the rules of mapping, which include you've got to incorporate data into that. So I talked about VOC data earlier, and where I started when I first started mapping. That VOC data, you want to put that in your maps, because it's really going to help you identify the moments of truth, because the maps themselves don't identify the moments of truth. It's the data, the emotions, and all of those kinds of things that really help you identify the moments of truth. So we want to digitize the maps, and typically that means putting it in a platform where you can then integrate the data, where you can connect with a data platform that's got that VOC data and other kinds of data that you want to bring in the map. Okay. Then the third step is to look inward. I call the third step introspect. And this is all about service blueprint, right? It's about, the way that I say it is, you can't fix what's happening on the outside for the customer if you don't fix what's happening on the inside. The people, the systems, the tools, the processes, all that stuff that's supporting the experience that the customer is having, or that's facilitating or actually building that experience that the customer is having. So we've got to develop those service blueprints and look at what's happening behind the scenes. That's really where things are breaking down, especially after we've identified the moments of truth, because we want to especially focus on those pain points and make sure that we fix those pain points so that the customer can move forward. And I think it went out of order here because step number 3 is identify, and step number 4 is the service blueprint and the looking inward. After that, we want to ideate, and that's all about future state mapping and designing the future state experience, again, with your customers. We want to get customers in the room, brainstorm and ideate, come up with some great, fun ideas of what a future experience could look like. And then the last step is to, implement. So we've already, figured out what's broken. We need to fix that. And then we've identified what the new experience is going to be. And then we've got to implement that. So we're going to implement, test with our customers, fail fast, retest, rejigger, retest, and get the new experience out there. And then really importantly, and we talked about this before we came on the air, but importantly is to get the employees involved at that point too, right? We need to train the employees on the new processes. We need to train the employees on the new experience and how to deliver that experience. We've got to close the loop with our customers too and let them know, hey, you used to do A, B, and C, and now you're going to do A, C, and B, whatever, the experience has changed. So we've got to let customers know what the new experience is going to be as well. So that's at a high level, that's what the process is. To your point about B2C and B2B, so the process is the same for B2C or B2B. But what I end up doing is when I'm working with B2B clients, we change things up a little bit. So in the first step, when I say when we're planning for who's going to be in the workshop, obviously we're planning on who from the client side is going to be in there, and then which customers are going to be in the room and doing the mapping. On the B2B side, what we do is we typically, because they don't want, various accounts in the room together with each other, because a lot of times your clients are competitors, right? So let's say you're especially focused on the software industry, but you don't want to have SAP, Oracle, and Salesforce in the same room mapping a journey, right? So we'll pick one, right? That would be pretty interesting though. But we would, we would pick, yes, it would. We will pick one account at a time, and we'll map with one account at a time. And this has really worked well for my clients because what they end up doing is using the mapping as a relationship, not only to understand and improve the experience, but also as a relationship building and reinforcing tool as well, right? So that when we first pick the account that we're going to map with, we let them pick the issues. What are the issues that are causing the biggest pain for you in working with us, right? And they come in and we focus on those experiences, and map those experiences. And it's all about them, right? I advise my client to sit and listen, and then let the whoever is there from that account, from their customer, talk about their experience and do a readout, tell the story. So let's say we picked, a customer, I'll just use, it's just an easy example of customer service, right? Tell the story of what it's like to, experience our customer service and call in for customer service or get technical support or whatever it is, right? But tell the story from, when that issue first happened, what was the issue and why did it happen, first of all, and then, the journey that they had. And it's really powerful because my clients will sit there and listen, and they will, they're shocked at what they hear most of the time. The outcome is typically, oh my gosh, we didn't know we caused this kind of pain for our customers. And like I said, very powerful.
Yeah. The couple of things over there, Annette, which I wanted to just clear with you as we move forward. Is it always easy to bring in customers and clients in these workshops? Or
No. Go ahead.
There's also a culture difference, by the way, because I've tried that with a couple of clients in Middle East and Pakistan, and I'm from Pakistan, by the way, so I work there and in the Middle East and UAE, but there's always a lot of reservation from my client's side that they don't want to expose themselves to their clients or their customers. So that's the first thing. It's not even with the clients or customers. Right. Start with the client. Our clients aren't ready yet.
Yes. Well, and that's a big thing, right? Because that is what this is all about. You have to put yourself, if you're going to commit to a customer experience transformation, you've got to put yourself out there. You have to be open to hearing the good, the bad, and the ugly. You have to put yourself out there. You have to be committed to listening and committed to doing something about what you hear. And if you're not ready to do that, then, like I said earlier, don't even bother doing the maps yet, because if you're not ready, then it's just a waste of everybody's time. But it's a mindset shift, it's a behavior shift, it's a culture, it's a big step to take. And so, yeah, if they're not ready, I would just set it aside, and when you're ready, let's do it. But until then, you're just wasting people's time, because when you go into these journey mapping workshops, you set an expectation, right? You set the expectation that we're listening, we're taking what we hear, and we're going to do something about it. And if you don't do that, you've actually damaged the relationship more than helped it at that point.
Yeah. And I guess in that context, you're in the perfect place, because I think California, Silicon Valley, a lot of the organizations, especially the tech organizations, would be open to that. Because it's different in different parts of the world. So,
Yep.
But typically what I've seen a lot of people also, the way they approach it is say, okay, let's actually use whatever VOC we have. Yes, let's use the employee experience and employee input on their experience with the customers. Where do they feel? Because they have, especially front-facing, on-stage employees have a lot of valuable insight to give.
Absolutely.
Because they face customers every single day, especially salespeople and contact center people and implementation people, for example, if we're talking about the tech space. And then later on, you kind of so you end up with a assumptive map, but which is based on real VOC, wherever you can get it, and real employee feedback about their experience and their experience with customers. And then later on, you try and fill in the gaps with customers without necessarily showing them that initial assumptive map that you've made, but the areas where you're not sure about things. So would you change that approach?
No, no, I'm sorry. Absolutely not. You know what? Starting with assumptive map is perfectly fine. It is absolutely fine, because to your point, we already have a lot of feedback, whether it's from our surveys or it's from, to your point, the voice of the customer through the employee, right? Employees have so much knowledge. They're so smart and have so much experience interacting with customers. They've seen and heard it all, right? And a lot of our employees are obviously customers of the business too. So an assumptive map is a good place to start, but you can't stop there, right? And to your point, you've got to go validate what you have. And there are two different ways that you can validate. You mentioned one and said you don't do the other. So the one is you show the map that you've already created, and they can walk through it and fill in the gaps, right? The other way is to just go ahead and have them map, and then you bring the two maps together and you identify yourself where the gaps are, right? Either one is perfectly fine, but I think the key point here is that you've got to bring the customer and the customer perspective in, So assumptive map is absolutely, and when I first started mapping, that was how I did all of my journey mapping, was to create that assumptive map too, because a lot of times building that assumptive map, it's the first step in getting people, stakeholders engaged in the process and engaged in, and sort of a heads up on, oh boy, here we go. Here we go. This is what we know and we're learning, and we're going to have to fix this. Okay, now let's bring customers in to validate that, and then let's get to work. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's really neat. Annette, you also mentioned the word relationship over there. In B2B, you're able to use these sessions or the journey mapping process or the workshops to actually help strengthen the relationship. Can you speak a little more to that? Because B2B really, one of the key things which a lot of people do say is, listen, B2B especially, it's all about relationships.
Yes, absolutely. And this is how I started. I've done B2B mapping in a couple of different ways, but this is the one that I find most successful. I was on the phone with somebody yesterday, and they said, well, how will we do this, and how long will it take? And I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take 4 hours. We're going to understand what their issues are, and and they can pick two maps. We'll do two maps. We'll get the right people in the room from their side, the folks who were involved in the scope, whatever the scope of the map is. We don't want just random people from the customer's organization in the room mapping. We want them to pick people who are connected to that specific journey and who have intimate knowledge of what the specific steps have been to, for that experience. And then, so they come in and they map. And so I always tell them, let's pick 2 maps. We can do 2. We'll have 2 different teams if we need to. You guys map. The client is going to sit and listen. And after you're done mapping, you're going to do a readout. Again, like I said, tell the story of what happened and why it was so painful. And we typically have a Q&A where the client can then ask the customer specific questions about things that happened along that journey and just digging a little bit deeper into the why. And then we'll close that session with just some brainstorming of, well, you know what, we know these are your pain points. How could we have fixed this? What could we have done better? We're not trying to problem solve or anything right now, but in the future, what should we do to make this better, right? So, and then after that, we go for happy hour. And you know what? Honestly, it's a great way to just, okay, it was a very intense 4 hours. Seriously, it is a very intense 4 hours. And then we just kind of go and just have a drink and talk about what we just did, and it just kind of debrief a little bit. Was it valuable? How did you feel about, and it's a totally different, and again, to your point about B2B, all about relationships, and it's just more into solidifying that relationship. After we do that, what I typically do is have a call with the customer a couple of days later and say, give me your feedback about that workshop, right? How did you feel about it? And more importantly, what did you feel like you couldn't say during those 4 hours? Is there anything that I should be sharing with the client that maybe, and you know what, usually there isn't. Usually they'll say, no, we were so honest. We shared everything that happened. But every once in a while, they might think of something after the workshop and say, oh, you know what, I wish I would have said this. I wish I would have said that. So there's sort of a closed loop already there from me to say, I'm working with the client to make sure that this relationship is going to be stronger. And here's how I'm helping, right? First of all, I want to make sure that your needs were met during that session. Now I'm going to go back to the client, share your additional feedback, and we're going to develop a report of findings and then come back to you with those findings and tell you what we're going to do as a result of that. So yes, so all of that really helps to, build on the relationship.
So it's a lot of really close attention to their needs, basically, and then closing the loop with them.
Yeah.
Of saying that, listen, these guys are really serious and they want to help really meet the needs that were either undermet or unmet, and that entire process helps bring more closeness in the relationship.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely. Yeah.
One other question I had there, Annette, for you before we move on, was about candor. So having sometimes what I can see a challenging situation where the client's customers have been having a difficult time with your client, and hence are kind of reserved and not willing to share as much or be as candid. So is that just about right customer selection, or is there some other magic to it?
You know what? And I've seen that happen, and it's always good to have a third-party facilitator in the room to keep that moving and to help that along and set the rules for what's going to happen here in the room. And typically, I think it helps when I'm in the room or when there's somebody else in the room who's sort of I don't want to say the person who's going to keep things honest and keep things moving and keep things, but it's true. I think if it was just the client and the customer in the room, it would probably go sideways, right? But having that facilitator in the room, I'm standing there encouraging them to tell us what really happened, to really just be honest and open. And I meet with the customer before the call to really lay out before the workshop, to lay out the rules of engagement as well, to say, you know what, this is all about you. This is all about fixing what's not right. And we can only do that if you're open and honest and candid about, and trust me, I have not had, after you set those rules and the expectations, it's not been bad.
Oh, that's a great tip, Annette. Thank you so much. Um, I feel confident myself now going to some of these B2B guys.
Awesome. Awesome.
Annette, a little bit about, okay, so we've talked about typical project cycle. I think you kind of addressed some of the challenges that you might have along the way. What about then the employee engagement and this whole thing about helping or building or connecting your employee base with the cultures and values of your organization through journey
Yep.
mapping, and ideally with the same kind of context of a B2B environment where you did this workshop and then later on, can you think of any example in that space of how the employees were motivated?
You know what? It comes. So first of all, obviously you've got to have a pretty strong culture in place, and culture is all about core values and behavior, right? And the behaviors that we see in a customer-centric culture have to be aligned around doing what's right and doing what's best for the customer always. And so I think through journey mapping, one or two things happen here. First of all, a lot of times there are employees who don't feel like they impact the customer or the customer experience at all. But the journey maps change that thinking, right? Because the journey maps allow everybody to see how they're connected, especially when you do the service blueprint. The service blueprint is the thing that really adds the bigger picture for everybody. And typically we think that the customer experience is all about the front line, but the back office, people who are behind the scenes, absolutely impact the customer experience just like the front line does. They're the people who are designing and creating the invoices. They're the people who are designing the product, who may never ever talk to hopefully they do. Hopefully they do. But but on a day-to-day basis, they're not interacting with customers on a daily basis, right? So those folks feel like, I don't really have any impact on the customer experience. But when we do the journey maps and the service blueprints, and we take them and then use them for training and onboarding and ongoing education and showing them what the new experience is going to be, that's when employees really learn about how they impact the customer and the customer experience, and that's where the connection can be made to then the customer-centric, the values and the behaviors, and tying that all together. I haven't done that with a client, tying it back to the core values and the corresponding behaviors. You brought that up, and I think that's a great. I've stopped at. We use this for training and onboarding and everything, and allowing them to see how even the back office impacts the experience. But it's an interesting concept to then tie that back to the core values and the behaviors as a result of those.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you want to give a branded experience where they really feel your organization and what your organization's mission is. It's really interesting. There is someone in South Africa by the name of Chantel Botha.
Oh yeah, I know her.
I think she works in that space, although I think she's gone more into digital of late. But it'll be interesting anyway. So does then that bit with the employees, that basically, does that start from the first workshop itself, or it's more when you're doing the service blueprinting? Or do you always try to, because some people say that if you don't engage the employees up front, or the relevant stakeholders, of course, up front, it'll be difficult to engage them when you're trying to build the solution.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I, when in that first step in my process, the planning step, I make sure that I have the right people in the room. And we think about, I'll use, again, the customer service example. We think, oh, it's a customer service journey map. We just have to have some customer service folks in the room. But that's not right? We actually need to have folks from sales, because they sold the dream, marketing, because their messaging might have been off, product marketing, because maybe their documentation, whatever it was off, product design, because they built the product that somebody's calling about, so they've got to hear the pain. And so you've got to have other groups in the room as well who have been involved with that particular pain and the reason that the customer was calling customer service to begin with. So it starts there. And I would go back even further. Like, journey mapping is a part of your overall, roadmap and your strategy. And it really, it's a learning experience, and it creates a lot of data and things that you'll then use to go and improve the experience. But anytime we're going to make a change, I mean, we've got to start with getting the employees on board and getting them involved and involving them. The key is to involve them and not to force it on them, right? So the more that we can involve them and get their feedback and the better. And, a great place to do that. Now we're jumping all over the place, but a great way to do that is, your governance structure with your CX champions and your culture committee and all of these different committees, because that's how we're going to get that grassroots groundswell to make the change happen, right? To get all this work done. So, we can't think that the CCO or the core CX team is going to do all this work. They're not. They're doing all of the understanding work. They're doing the research and the insights and the analytics and providing those other teams with the insights that they need to go and make the changes that they need to make. But that's, we've got to get the employees involved early on for sure. Otherwise they're just going to push back. They're going to think this is another, flavor of the month kind of initiative. And it's not an initiative. It is a journey. We're in this for the long haul, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. So.
Okay. Annette, before we go towards the closer to it,
Okay.
actually rewind a little bit and ask you what kind of, and I think it ties in with the benefits that we're going to talk about. What are the typical benefits you see your clients get from journey mapping? But why do they come to you initially? Obviously, it's not specifically for journey mapping, or maybe it is, I don't know. And I mean, do they come to you with some challenges, some problems they're facing, which they want to resolve? What's the initial reason they actually come to you for journey mapping? Or forget about the journey mapping. Yeah.
So it is sort of twofold, right? There are folks who come to me and they know they're at a point where they, in their, CX transformation, where they need to do journey mapping, but they have no idea how to do it, right? They understand the benefits, and they just need somebody to teach them how to do it properly. So that's one way. The other way is, I have a lot of folks who come to me and say, I'm brand new to this field. I'm a brand new CCO. I'm a brand new head of CX. I'm a brand new, whatever the role is within the CX organization. And I need some help, and so I actually do a lot of coaching and mentoring for clients to take them through, CX strategy, soup to nuts, from start to finish, and I go in and I'll assess what they think they know. So your question was, what are the problems that they're coming to me? They think they know their problem, but then when I go through my approach of doing sort of my initial assessment and everything, there are a lot of other problems. They may have that one problem that they thought they had, but there are a lot of other problems as well. So that's typically how or why they come to me is either specifically we need somebody to teach us how to map, or it's somebody who's brand new who just needs someone to coach them along this whole 2 to 4 year journey that it really is. So
that's interesting. It's interesting that when you say they're brand new, so that means that a lot of organizations, the role of CX officer or CCO is kind of growing now in organizations. And they're coming new. So which backgrounds or which functions do they typically come from in that role?
That's really an interesting question. And I've had them come from all over the place. The biggest one that I've had 3 clients so far come to me who are the head of sales, which is really unusual. I've had a couple that are CMOs or, marketing. Or they've just been newly hired into the position and maybe have had some CX experience in the past, but never have been a CCO or have run the whole organization. So they want some help with that. But yeah, it was funny to me that there were 3 heads of sales, and I translated that to mean, there's this realization, because there's this question about, or this debate about acquisition versus retention, right? And these are the folks who are spending their time bringing in all this new business. And for some, the sales cycles are really long, and they've been working hard to bring those accounts in or bring those customers in. And they realized, we're losing these folks. And why are we losing them? We've got to figure that out, because it's better to retain them and cheaper to retain them than it is to try to acquire new ones. So yeah, I think that's what's happening there.
That's really, yeah. It's really funny. I was talking to someone maybe 2 weeks ago, someone in Minnesota, and they were trying to convince their finance person. The organization is growing in revenue every year, and this CCO is trying to convince the finance person that, listen, I understand our revenue is growing, but look at the bucket. There are so many leakages in it that we're not able to retain all this new business that we bring in. Imagine what the situation would be if we actually were able to retain them. And the
Yeah.
finance guy just turned around and said, listen, we're growing in numbers. That's all I care about.
Exactly, exactly. And that therein lies the challenge, right? The focus on growth and acquisition over retention. So yeah, that is something we've definitely got to overcome.
I guess as long as everyone's not able to retain, you'll keep acquiring new customers.
Exactly.
It's a bizarre way of
There you
looking
go.
at
That's interesting math too. Yeah, okay.
it. And then, so, okay, this is really cool. Thanks. But okay, now let's talk a little bit about what kind of benefits. Okay, and I guess there'll be quite a wide variety of hardcore number benefits, and then the
Yep.
softer relationship, culture, line of sight, cross silo breaking benefits. And so, what are the typical benefits that you see, especially in these B2B kind of
Yeah.
space?
You know what? I think there are the one of the biggest ones probably is around the alignment of the organization, right? So it's getting CEO and executive commitment. Again, I've been in several of these journey mapping workshops where it's such an aha moment when the executives are sitting in the room. I've had a couple where the CEO is in the room, and um, yeah, so I think that's the biggest benefit is alignment. So alignment and getting that commitment from the executives to move forward to actually understand what customer experience is, and then to provide the resources that the team needs to go and dig deeper and then redesign the experience. The other part of that, which we've already talked about, is helping the frontline and the back office, really every employee understand how they impact the customer and the customer experience. So I think that's a big piece, is around alignment and adoption. I think that's probably one of the bigger benefits that I've seen with my clients.
So it's basically a lot of it is actually bringing everyone aware about what needs to change, and then the desire to change and the knowledge to change.
Yeah,
Because so if you kind of see it in the ad car change model, the, that entire the first three bits come straight on, and then you have the CEO sitting in, and when they see firsthand the pain that clients are going through, they're
yep,
willing to give the budget and reinforce the
exactly,
changes as well.
exactly. Yes,
That's
yeah.
that's pretty
You
powerful,
can't ask.
actually.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you can't
Yeah, you
ask for
can't
more than
ask for
that,
more.
right?
So have, by the way, has any of the CEO of the clients you work with turned around and said, "Listen, Annette, I think I could run my entire organization with this journey map."
No, they haven't said that yet. It's a slow process. Yes, they figure it out pretty quickly, but it is a slow process for them to then take that and go run with it.
But I
So,
guess it also depends on which challenge you're working at, unless it's the end-to-end life cycle.
yes,
Anyway,
exactly.
yeah. Um, and then last but not least, and thank you so much. I
Okay.
think there's so much in here that I have a feeling that I'm going to have to come back to you for further breakout sessions if that's okay with you.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
But if you wanted to give three tips to someone in a B2B environment, let's stick to B2B
Okay.
now that we've got
Okay.
into it, who wants to start mapping journeys for whatever reason. Okay, let's forget about
Yes.
the reason. But if you wanted to, actually, some of the lack of those reasons might be another thing which you want to tip them. What were your top
Yeah.
three tips to get them started on journey mapping?
Number one would be to get customers in the room. You've got to do this with customers. Okay.
Okay.
Like I said earlier, I shifted my thinking from started with assumptive to actually starting with the customers in the room. So I think that's number one.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to say number three, so I can think about number two a little bit more. Number three is um, the maps are useful not just for customer journeys, but also for employee, vendors, partners, franchisees, all of that, right? So anybody that has an experience with your brand, you should map their experiences to make sure, because we haven't done it yet, but I have a couple of clients where the next step is for us to map the vendor experience, because they know that's a painful one too, and they want to do things better for their vendor. So if you're going to be people centric and customer centric, you can call it customer centric, but it really is, they're all your customers, right? Whether it's employees or they have internal customers, your external customers, your vendors, that whole thing. So journey mapping is not just for your customers. Map your employees and vendors, etc. Number two would be to make sure that you always get an executive in the room, the one that might be on the fence about what this really is and what it really means. Get him or her in the room, and even if they can just stay for 5 minutes, and bring them in at that 5 minutes that is going to be the most impactful 5 minutes. And I would say that would be when the customer is doing their readout, after they've already mapped everything, when the customer is standing there telling you their story about what the experience is going to be. If that key executive can be in there for those 5 or 10 minutes, I guarantee you they will be won over. Absolutely.
Okay. Cool. The last thing I just wanted to ask you.
Okay.
When you map the customer's experiences and the pain points, does it kind of become automatic that at some point, because to resolve those pain points, you're going to have to engage your employees and vendors, and a lot of the improvements will have to be done in your internal processes.
Right.
So does it kind of become a natural fallout that you'll eventually get to employee and vendor experience mapping, or not necessarily? You're kind of doing point solutions at the pain points, and then it's an evolution, or you just mentioned
I don't think it's a natural connection to go and do that. I think because when we map the employee experience, for example, we're looking at their, the things that are happening along their life cycle and how they're interacting with the company as an employee, whether that's, oh gosh, it's painful to get my benefits, or, oh, I'm taking some time off, and how is that experience going to be? Maybe around some of their life experiences as they relate to a day at work as well, or a week at work. So those are the kinds of things that we need to think about when we're mapping the employee experience, that it's all about, at that point, it's all about them and how they interact with the brand as their employers. So it's a little bit different. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, Annette, you've given us a lot. Seriously, really appreciate the time that you've taken out for us. And would it be okay if some of the audience members eventually reach out to you with questions?
Always happy to help, always happy to answer questions. So yeah, that would be awesome. You can find me either on LinkedIn or Twitter, or at Annette Franz, or feel free to email me at Annette@cx-journey.com.
Okay, perfect. So thanks again, and I promise you I'll be in touch with you for some of those breakout sessions, because I think some of the themes that you picked on over here deserve more time.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for having me. And yeah, you know what? You asked some great questions that really, are thought-provoking, that got me answering things that nobody's asked me, in a long time. So thank you for that. And always happy to talk journey mapping. So happy to do some breakouts. So
Great. Thanks again. And thank you all for joining us as well. Please feel free to reach out to Annette on the addresses she mentioned, or post a question here on our channel, and we'll definitely have Annette engage with that. Thanks again, all of you. And Annette, inshallah, we'll be in touch again.
Sounds good. Thank you. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye. Too.
Bye.